Chris
Cuomo was like, I want to get Mr. Gallup on the phone.
This is Chris Cuomo.
Well, first off, there is no Mr. Gallup, and second, you're naked. I don't know if this is another wife yoga video.
It's what I do.
Well, then I guess I'll take Mr. Quinnipiac. Put your dick away, Chris. Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's get into the polls here, because everyone has been talking about this. And I think, listen, polls matter. You can't be someone who entirely discounts them, but the methodology matters as well. And I think we'll come back to this. Polls are just as much, or they have morphed into just as much a tool to try and shape public opinion as much as they're supposed to be sort of a temperature gauge of public opinion. But this is the newest CNN poll. Let them say it.
Is this translating into support for his opponent in November, Joe Biden?
It overwhelmingly is. Take a look at this matchup that we have. It's unbelievable to me. 55%
He's being
of
voiced
voters
over
right
by
now
the kid
say
with
that
glasses
they would
from
vote
Polar
for Joe
Express.
Biden. Only 41% say they vote for the president. And that 55% is so important because it means that Biden's over 50%. I went back and I looked at the polls back in 2016. From this point onward, Hillary Clinton never reached this level. She never got there. She never got above 50%. So this means, especially looking at the other polling, that the president will have to take back some of Biden's supporters if, in fact, he wants to win.
Okay, either first shave your chest or wear a tie. There's something very disturbing about that chest hair with, and you know, when you look at the poll, and can you imagine that guy opening a Christmas present? This is exactly what I wanted, the best of the guess who. Something that I think is they shouldn't have done is silly, and this is a perfect example of ego. And the Trump campaign sent a cease and desist letter to CNN, which of course they've ignored. But, and I don't say that he shouldn't send a cease and desist because it's inaccurate.
Right.
I just don't think it looks good.
No, the optics are great.
Yeah. But let's look at the actual methodology of the poll. So it may come as no surprise that the source of the poll, or the worst polls that they're discussing there for Donald Trump, is CNN. Yeah, that's the actual source for the poll. And if you're taking into the methodology, again, for people who go, this looks really bad. Well, Hillary Clinton, well, hold on a second. If you're taking different sample sizes, only 25% were Republicans, 32% Democrats, and 44% independents. And what really matters there is whoever's conducting the poll, that high number of independents, you can really stack that deck.
Oh, yeah.
You can hand pick independents. Let's look at how CNN is framing their own poll. Okay, a couple of things here, but this is where they say that there has been overwhelming support for the protest. But see the catch.
This is one of the first sort of measures of whether or not people are agreeing with these protests or not. And what we see is that they overwhelmingly are agreeing with the protests. 84% say that they are justified, these peaceful protests.
Okay. 83% said that these peaceful vigils, the word peaceful was slipped in there. 84% of people support peaceful protests. What about violent protests?
Right.
Did we ask them? Yeah, the number drops to 27%.
Oh.
And keep in mind, that's with a sample of 75% non-Republican voters. And this is something that I think is very important because, first off, we've showed how the sampling did. And by the way, while we're talking about peaceful protests, can you name me any major city where over the course of these 2 weeks, any major city, I'm not talking about 20 people down in a suburb, any major city where once the lights went out, the protest didn't result in any violence. And keep in mind, when I say that, I'm not saying any protest where there wasn't $25 million in property damage like you saw in Minneapolis alone. Let's just compare it to the Tea Party, meaning zero crime. That's the standard. Zero crime.
Cleaner than when they got there.
Any big city where that's been the case in the last 2 weeks. You can't name one.
No.
Now, again, there have been isolated protests, small, and I want to be in the suburbs in the middle of the day, and then the lights go down, and the tear gas comes out.
And by the way, it should be 100% of Americans okay with peaceful protests.
Yes.
That's part of one of the rights that we have. We can protest injustice peacefully.
I would answer yes.
Everybody should be fine with that.
I would answer yes if the question was peaceful protest.
Who are the other 13 or whatever percent it was? Jerks.
Fascist bees. No protest.
It's their instinct.
Here's something, too, that's pretty important. There's a difference between polling people on what they think of a personality versus specific policies, right? So let's go to some specific policies because they talk about Donald Trump and how he's not polling very well in any given area, but the poll is really, what do you think of Donald Trump on blank? Well, when you go to specific policies, and I think this is important because 71% of Americans, we've talked about this, they support using the National Guard to address protests and demonstrations. That's 71%. So that's different from how do you feel about peaceful protests?
Yeah.
58% supported sending in the actual military. Wow. Right? 58% supported, 71% support using the National Guard.
Yeah.
Which candidate supported the National Guard? Which candidate excoriated the president for wanting to send in the National Guard? There's only one person who's had the balls to say, all right, we're going to send in the National Guard.
Yeah.
And that's going against the grain with everyone in the media and entertainment industry. So it's important to keep that in context. Now, I say this because that was pointed to as the most as extreme right wing, right? Radical right-wing extremists, fascism, they want to send in the National Guard. 71% of Americans, not saying that polling makes something morally justified.
No,
in this case, constitutionally, I believe it's morally justified to protect the rights of citizens.
It's legal.
That being said, 71% of Americans supported it. Now let's contrast that. That's radical right-wing extremism, sending in the National Guard, with radical left-wing extremism. Defunding the police and renaming streets and buildings.
The public outcry over George Floyd's death has ignited debate and action on police reform, and a lot of people advocating for what they have taken to calling defunding the police. The phrase even appears in large yellow letters on the newly named Black Lives Matter Plaza on 16th Street near the White House.
While we're talking about police, defunding the police, wildly unpopular. Only 16% of Americans support defunding the police, while 65% oppose it. 19% are unsure. I guess those are the SoundCloud rappers. But again, this is so remarkable because some people will say, well, you're misrepresenting it. Defund the police. That just means defunding it to a degree. Some people believe that, but that's not what is being demanded by Black Lives Matter. Right. You have the mayor of Minneapolis who checked his privilege and recognized his own brokenness as a white person. Yeah. Be drummed out of the core by thousands of people for saying that he didn't support the outright abolition of police. That is not a minority opinion. That's the Minneapolis City Council opinion. Let's be clear. So even if you're saying, well, that poll might be tainted, 65% oppose it. Only 16% of Americans support that policy. So this is why this is important to me when they constantly say we have this radical extreme right wing on YouTube, right? People going on the radical rabbit hole. Let's take the furthest right opinion as it was presented. Sending in the National Guard. How dare you? This is fascism. 71% of Americans don't see it that way. They support it. Then let's take the furthest left opinion that we can have right now in this current conflict. Defunding the police. 65% opposed to it. So I ask you, which wing, as represented officially by the heads of their party, is more radical? There are several reasons, by the way, that pollsters have gotten things wrong. Absolutely. Remember when it used to be Trust Nate Silver? Mm-hmm. Now it's just like, oops. That's his website subtext.
It's like a GIF now.
So it has a lot to do, like you said, with how the media covers Donald Trump. There's something called social desirability bias. Yeah. And I'm going to get a little bit wonky here, but I'll try and keep it short because I know that we are in pink hairdos. Social desirability bias, okay? It's the tendency of respondents in polls or surveys. They lie about their actual beliefs sometimes because they want to answer in a way that they view as more socially acceptable. Yeah. Okay? So as it relates to voting, this social desirability bias, I'm saying this so that you know what it is. If you haven't been to college, you'll probably hear about it there. It created something called the Bradley effect, okay? Named after Tom Bradley. He was a black candidate, lost in the 80s in California. It was a gubernatorial race, despite the fact that he was leading in the polls. But people didn't want to be perceived as racist. Exactly. They said, oh, I'll vote for that guy. And then they went back home and they said, you voting for that guy? I said, no. So, but you just told them that you were going to vote for that guy. I said, yeah, it's because right behind him was a Black Panther with a baton. So they said they were going to vote for him because even though they weren't going to vote for him, right? And then there have been case studies in this. Now, let's, for context, take a look at the way the media has actually covered President Trump.
Most presidents would use a crisis like that as an opportunity to bring the country together and to denounce hatred. But not this president. Over the last 12 months, Trump has instead amplified his racist rhetoric and policies.
I talked about the president. The president is a racist. As a matter of fact, I've known that the president is a dangerous human being, a would-be dictator who would move in the direction that he's doing.
President Trump today denying that his racist tweets were racist. The world is watching.
And today, it is the United States of America, the former beacon of the free world, that is the subject of global revulsion and disgust because of the raw, ugly racism and ethno-nationalism of our president.
And by the way, every single source for those is the previous clip.
Right. Yeah. See CNN clip B.
I knew for a long time Donald Trump could be a racist and dangerous man. Really? How'd you know that? I seen it.
All the other times I said that.
Wait,
You don't remember?
Jake Tapper and shit. Good. Okay, now we understand. So the principle, again, not wanting people, we talk about the Bradley effect, to perceive you as racist. Well, how do you think people are going to respond when the media consistently says, if you support Donald Trump, you're a racist. Racist, racist, racist. Right. The MAGA symbol, the OK symbol, which is, by the way, don't tell Home Alone 2, it's on the cover. For crying out loud, is this is racist, this is white supremacy. If you vote for Donald Trump, it's white supremacy. Check your privilege. Voting for Donald Trump is white privilege.
Yeah.
What you probably will want to avoid being perceived as racist. And so that's another reason that the polls can't be relied upon. Not always, but specifically we've seen historically with Donald Trump. Another thing that isn't measured by polls, we'll go to Michael Knowles in just 2 seconds here. There's simple approval and disapproval, right? And it glosses over enthusiasm. And I know that a lot of people say, well, enthusiasm doesn't matter because people are either going to vote or they're not. No, actually, it's a more significant determiner in who actually gets out and votes on Election Day. And that's the reason there's this huge discrepancy between likely voters and then actual voters. And these polls are likely voters. And specifically, as it really from Al Gore onward, outside of Barack Obama, you can think of Al Gore, you can think of John Kerry with John Edwards, and then you can think of Hillary Clinton, of course. There really has been an enthusiasm problem on the left. So Hillary Clinton, right, she led significantly among likely voters, but then trailed with actual voters. Mm-hmm. Now, recent polls, they show that among registered voters who support Trump, 55% of them are very enthusiastic about backing him. For Biden, it's half. At 28% are very enthusiastic. And I tell you what, those 28% are committed to the lie.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and just to go to your point,
like when they say, I'm going to enthusiastically vote for Biden, it's like, you threw up in your mouth a little bit. I did. I swallowed it back.
You got me.
Yeah. They'll probably forget, just like Joe Biden will, he'll forget he's running for president by election day, but nonetheless. In the CNN poll, it goes back to your point. 70% of the people that said that they were voting for Trump, they said it's because I want Trump to win. 60% of the people voting for Biden didn't say it because they like Biden. They said they were voting against Trump. Right. So that's not enthusiasm for your candidate. That's just being pissed off in a moment. That can change drastically.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. We'll wrap this up with, I think it's important, again, the most important takeaways from this poll is A, CNN is not a news organization, okay? B,
number one.
That's just, I think we can all agree. Sure. So, like, they would have been better off, they would have had more cover if they didn't release this poll. Did CNN just the facts? But you did a poll with 75% non-Republican respondents.
Hold on. Let's just remember. CNN searched high and low and asked every pollster they could, can anyone come up with these numbers? No? All right, let's make our own.
Yeah,
let's make our own. Let's just, nobody? No,
what if we just wrote our own?
Chris Cuomo was like, I want to get Mr. Gallup on the phone.
This is Chris Cuomo.
Well, first off, there is no Mr. Gallup, and second, you're naked. I don't know if this is another wife yoga video.
It's what I do.
Well, then I guess I'll take Mr. Quinnipiac. Put your dick away, Chris. Yeah, that's a good idea. So, number one, CNN is not a news organization. Two, there's a huge difference between polling people on personality traits, like how do you think Donald Trump presents the country? Do you think Donald Trump is right? Versus specific policies. Should we send in the National Guard? Should we defund the police? Those are the polls that you should be looking at to get a more accurate gauge at this point, and still taking into account that there is a huge handicap, 75% non-Republican responders with CNN. And the most important takeaway here is this shouldn't affect your voting pattern or your canvassing patterns at all. You still need to go out. You still need to change people's minds. That's what changed my mind, right? Didn't exist before the last election. That's what it's for. It's to walk people down the path of rationalizing their own argument. There are far more people, as you see with these individual policy polls, who are more conservative than they realize. So all of you have a job to do that. Don't think, well, because there's high enthusiasm, Donald Trump's going to win anyway. Assume that he won't. Assume the worst and work for the best. Know that these polls, every time one of these polls comes out, they are used to try and manipulate the American public perception of elections just as much as they used to be used to try and gauge where the election is actually going. That's not the case anymore. Polls are a political tool at this point. Be aware of it and do your part. Guess who I am? I'm Josh Hartnett. Bet you didn't think you'd see that face in a while. This is what we call an end card, which is where I tell you that you should subscribe if you like this video or click one of these other videos that you may like. Hit the notification bell. Of course, join Mug Club because that's what allows us to continue doing these videos. And just so you know, YouTube actually has created a new policy where they might start outright banning channels that are no longer commercially viable, which means that this is merely a figment of your imagination.